Hey guys, I'm Mikko. You've probably seen this technique where I'm cheating when I'm creating line art in some of my more complex illustrations. I want to clarify that this tutorial is only suitable for situations where you can actually save time using this. It's not a better way to draw, because when you are just hand drawing everything, you have more control over the line weight. But I'm going to get back to line weight later in this video. So let's first look at the basics where this is useful. Let's say that I have a very complex illustration like this one, and I want to add, for example, branches of foliage here. The branches are going to be very thin and complex in shape. If I just drew them over this line art, it would be very confusing for me to pick out which lines are the new ones that I want to add on top, and erasing them would take a lot of time. So I'm going to use my own cell brush. You can use any brush that fits with the shapes that you want to make that will be fitting. And this tutorial is Procreate specific. Basically, if you're using Photoshop, you can just do a stroke and separate that on its own layer, and that will be the exact same thing. So I'm gonna create a new layer, and I'm going to pick a different color so that it's easier for me to see what I'm doing. Now this color is temporary, so I don't need to think about it that much. So basically what I want to do here is add a few more branches and leaves, and these are going to be in the foreground on top of everything. This illustration is already done, so I don't need to actually do anything. So if somebody is like looking at this and feeling like, oh my god, Mikko is destroying the composition, that's true. But I'm only using this pre-existing line art because this is a good place to show where this would be useful if I needed to do something like this. Usually the way that I have used this technique is when I already have a lot of elements established in the drawing and I just want to add more detail on top to create a sense of overlapping. So this would be kind of complex to draw on this pre-existing illustration on the same layer. So I'm gonna show the layer structure a few times in this tutorial. So here is now the flat colors, which are on their own separate layer. And I want to turn this layer into part of this line art that is underneath. So to do this, I am going to duplicate the layer that has all the flat shapes. So now I have two layers that have the exact same shape. I am going to change the color of this one into the color of line art. So I'm gonna color pick the line art color from the line art layer. An easy way to do a color drop in this sort of instance is to just create a new layer, set it as a clipping mask by tapping the layer and then choosing clipping mask, and then just drag the color that you want to color everything on that layer and drop it. So what I want to do here is to expand this layer a little bit so that I can see the outlines. I'm going to first duplicate the layer again. And now I'm going to the effects panel and adding a Gaussian blur to the layer. And the blur is only going to be a small, tiny blur. I only need to see the lines a little bit because those are transparent lines that I am seeing right now. So I'm gonna leave it there. And now this layer has only a small Gaussian blur. And the way that I can make these lines more visible is by just duplicating this layer, merging it and duplicating it a few times more, until you have lines that don't have that sort of a soft blur. And the easiest way to make this super crisp is to just add a very small Gaussian blur, and that will define the thickness of those lines. And now that I have done this duplication a few times, the end result is that we have two layers that are almost the exact same, except that the layer underneath, the one that I added a Gaussian blur and duplicated a few times, it is now slightly larger to every direction. So to get line art out of this, all I need to do is select this layer, tap it once and press select. This will select all the pixels in that layer. But now, instead of manipulating this layer, I'm going to go to the layer underneath and then just hit clear. And this will erase all those pixels that we just selected, and it will leave hollow space. If I just isolate this layer, now we have line art for this. And it's kind of like an Art Deco look that is easy to achieve with this stuff. Now, to solve the problem that would otherwise take a lot of time, we can select the layer again, the green pixels here, just select the top layer, and that will select the green pixels or whatever color that you chose for this. And then go to the original line art and hit clear. And this way I can automatically erase all the lines from those parts that I didn't want to kind of like overlap with these elements that I have now in the foreground. One thing that you need to be aware of when using this method is that the lines that you create this way, they look very boring because they are even thickness in the whole image. So one way to fix this is use the line art brush that you used for your original line art. I am going to use the Fast Lines brush. You can create this brush by following this tutorial, and then just select the line art color and add a bit of line thickness to those lines so that it looks like your original drawing. By doing this, it's really easy to get close to the original look of your line art. I have used this trick so many times in this illustration that I honestly can't even tell myself which parts I use this technique and which parts are just drawn by hand. One more thing that you can use from this tutorial is that when you have created this line art and you have these colors, save that layer, because like doing this sort of color fill is really time consuming, especially when you have these sort of like thin ornate objects. And then just pull that down underneath your line art, and then you have already colored this like difficult part, and you can use it as a selection for painting. The trickiest part in this technique is that if you want to have really thin line art, remember that the initial Gaussian blur that you add to that flat layer, it has to be very small, because it's really easy to make the lines thicker by just adding more Gaussian blur and duplicating the layer several times, but it's much harder to make those lines thinner. So I hope you can use this to make that line art process a bit faster, and remember that this is only useful in illustrations that have these elements that take a lot of time to complete. This drawing took me several days to do, and if you want to have a tutorial on how you can make your line art look thinner, there is also a way to make all of your line art look thinner. And I can make a separate video out of that if anybody wants to see it. I'm Mikko, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Go and draw some very complex illustrations now. Bye!